Succession Explained, Season 4, Episode 9, Church and State. Kendall, Roman, and Shiv Roy attend their father Logan's funeral as interim co-CEOs navigating a business crisis. Days earlier, they manipulated ATN's election coverage to secure Mencken's promise blocking Lucas Matsson's acquisition. But that deal depended on fraud leverage and regulatory threats. Now, Shiv secretly works with Matsson to save the acquisition by proposing an American CEO to satisfy Mencken's concerns, positioning herself for the role, while her brothers plan to fight the sale at the board level, unaware she's already negotiating their defeat.
It's Logan Roy's funeral. The children are burying their father while navigating the crisis they created. Tom called the election for Mencken on ATN despite destroyed Milwaukee ballots, securing Mencken's promise to block Matsson's acquisition through regulatory pressure.
So the deal was supposed to be dead?
That was the plan. Trade democratic legitimacy for killing the sale. But that promise depends on Mencken's willingness to follow through.
And the funeral happens amid massive citywide protests over the contested election. The national consequences are visible everywhere.
Kendall arrives distressed because Rava took their children out of the city against his wishes. Security concerns are real.
What does Shiv want?
She's working with Matsson to save the acquisition, but her brothers don't know she's already negotiating a solution that undermines their leverage. Ewan, Logan's brother, wasn't on the program to speak, but he forces his way to the podium and delivers this scathing eulogy, condemning Logan's entire legacy, calling him a man who made the world coarser and meaner.
Does he acknowledge any complexity?
He tells a story from their childhood. Logan saved him from a polio-infected ship, but frames even that through their lifelong estrangement.
Then Roman is supposed to deliver the main eulogy. But when he gets to the podium, he completely breaks down, asks if his father is actually in the coffin, can't speak, just collapses.
In front of everyone?
Completely public breakdown. Someone records it. And Kendall has to step in. He wasn't planning to speak.
Kendall delivers this powerful counter-eulogy that reframes everything. He defends Logan's capitalist force, his vitality, his refusal to apologize, celebrates the ruthless worldview Roman invoked on election night.
So he's internalized it completely.
That's the reveal. Kendall has adopted his father's philosophy entirely. The hesitation about his children's future that Roman had to overcome? Gone.
While this is happening, Shiv and Matsson pitch Mencken on installing an American CEO to address his regulatory concerns. Make the acquisition politically palatable by putting a U.S. figurehead in charge.
Do they name who that CEO would be?
Deliberately vague, but Shiv is clearly positioning herself. Matsson confirms afterward that Mencken showed real interest.
Which means the deal Roman thought was solid, Mencken blocking the acquisition, was never actually locked in. Mencken tells Kendall regulatory concerns are out of his hands, but he's clearly flexible.
So Roman's leverage evaporates?
Completely. The transactional promise they secured by calling the election? Mencken is already exploring alternatives when presented with a politically acceptable option.
And Shiv reveals her pregnancy to her siblings during this, another layer of complexity. She's negotiating to become CEO while expecting Tom's child, with their marriage collapsed but showing signs of cautious reconciliation.
After the funeral, Kendall immediately starts maneuvering. Recruits Hugo to fight the acquisition at the board level, pressures Roman to help oppose what he frames as Shiv's moves, not realizing she's already negotiating the American CEO solution.
How does Roman respond?
Kendall tells him he fucked it with Mencken, blaming Roman for losing the leverage. And Roman is emotionally shattered from the funeral breakdown.
Then Roman goes into the street during the protests and confronts demonstrators, people angry about the election ATN called. He gets physically assaulted, which externalizes his complete internal collapse.
Why does he engage?
It's self-destructive, processing his father's death, his public humiliation, and Kendall blaming him for the Mencken situation by picking a fight he'll lose.
Meanwhile, Kendall's assistant Jess tells him she's quitting on the day of the funeral, another person extracting themselves from the pattern. He's isolated exactly when preparing this board fight. The funeral becomes this crucial reveal about who internalized Logan's worldview and who's breaking under its weight. Kendall delivers the eulogy defending his father's ruthlessness. He's become Logan. Roman completely collapses. He can't sustain the performance.
And Shiv is the strategist?
She's playing the longest game, positioning herself as CEO while her brothers think they're fighting Matsson. She knows Mencken is flexible because she gave him the politically acceptable alternative.
The election manipulation was supposed to give them leverage. Call Wisconsin for Mencken, he blocks the deal. But they traded democratic legitimacy for a promise from someone whose regulatory flexibility they completely misread.
So the acquisition might go through anyway?
With Shiv as the American CEO satisfying Mencken's concerns. Exactly what Kendall and Roman were trying to prevent by manipulating a presidential election.
And Tom, who made the actual on-air call declaring Mencken president-elect, is absent from the funeral, managing ATN during the protests his network helped create. He shows up briefly with this tentative exchange with Shiv about the pregnancy.
Are they reconciling?
It's complicated. Mutual exhaustion and the pregnancy creating this fragile connection amid the marriage collapse.
The funeral happens against citywide protests over the election they manipulated, while Shiv negotiates to become CEO of the company her brothers called that election to prevent from being sold, using a pregnancy to a husband whose marriage collapsed. Everything converges.
Mencken is already considering alternatives to blocking the sale. The election deal isn't holding. Roman is collapsing, while Kendall prepares a board fight against an opponent he hasn't identified. Shiv negotiates for the CEO role her brothers called an election to prevent.